hasn't quite got. Sorry, there's a slight delay. Louise, now he's done that, I haven't got the thingy.
It says it's streaming.
It does.
Right, yes, we're ready to go now.
We are we? Right, once again, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Planning Policy and Regeneration Strategy Committee. We'll start with apologies for absence, please. Are there any apologies for absence?
There's no apologies for absence.
Thank you. And I take it then there's no notification of substitute members.
No notification for subs.
Thank you very much. And item 2, declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything interesting they want to declare? Nothing at all? Thank you. Well, we go on to item 3. And this is the minutes, pages 5 to 8 of your pack. And to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 27th of May, 2020. Have you all read the minutes? And is there anything untoward that you can bring to my attention? Not at all. Good, thank you very much. I have no urgent business. And so we go on to item 5. I just have one thing to say on item 5, that we're going to have a members briefing about the Northampton local plan. Northampton Borough have brought out their local plan. So we're going to, I think Jim and Andy, Jim and Alan are going to have a look at it. And then they're going to bring it to a meeting of all members. I think that should be an extremely interesting meeting, everybody. So look out for it and please attend. Right, let's get on to business of this afternoon. We start with the 5-year housing land supply, and I think that's Alan. No, it isn't. Beg your pardon. It's Mark Shaw. Sorry, Mark.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair. This committee item considers the Council's housing land availability position for use in development management decisions. As a bit of background, to comply with the National Planning Policy Framework, South Northamptonshire Council is required to identify a supply of specific deliverable sites sufficient to provide a minimum of 5 years' worth of housing through the annual publication of its housing land availability study. The Council last demonstrated its housing supply using data that reflected the situation at the 1st of April 2019. The report that is before committee today updates this to reflect changes in actual and forecast housing delivery over the subsequent 12 months. Full details of the methodology and the associated analysis are contained in the accompanying report and its appendix. In summary, the report shows that over the previous 12 months, there were 459 housing completions against a target of 351. This continues the consistently high single-year delivery record. With respect to the situation moving forward, the report shows that there is an 8.26-year housing land supply in South Northamptonshire, including a calculated reduction for previous years' oversupply. Whilst it is considered appropriate to include any previous under and or oversupply in calculating the figures, for completeness and to demonstrate future resilience, a figure applying a non-oversupply approach has also been calculated. This shows that there would continue to be a 5-year housing land supply in South Northamptonshire. It should be noted that the absence of an up-to-date 5-year housing land supply would leave the council exposed to the risk of speculative planning applications that may not comply with South Northampton's strategic approach to development because its housing policies would be considered out of date. It is therefore the officer's recommendation that the Housing Land Availability Study 2020 is approved by the council in order to assist it in controlling the location of development from supported growth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions of Mark, please? Yes, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. Mark, a couple of things really, but if you can just help me out on one thing, it really crops up in 3.2 on page 26. And it's when you're talking about objectively assessed need. You're talking principally there, and I think referring back to the core strategy. How does the core strategy relate to the national approach? You know, with the formula and so on. At some point, is that the root source?
We're still meant to be using the part 1 plan at the moment for our figures, because we took it to this committee back in January, I believe it was, and although it's just over 5 years out of date, or 5 years since it was first adopted, it was considered that these figures were still the policies of that document were still valid and still current, and therefore we are still proposing to use the housing need figures from that document.
So, I mean, at what point does you probably know what I'm referring to. It's the thing that came out last year from central government, housing and economic needs assessment. Yeah. And it's got all this stuff in it about adjustment factors and, you know, ridiculously complicated formulas. I mean, at some point, does that take over from part 1 plan?
I mean, this assessment's been done on the part 1 plan. My understanding is that if the policies were considered out of date, then the other figures would have come into play. But at this moment in time, they don't.
Oh, okay, I'm with you then now. And the only other thing is more of a comment, really. It's when I was not aware of this Tewkesbury case, and I find that very interesting because that mirrors very closely our Rotherthorpe case, doesn't it? And what a good job that we didn't try to challenge the inspector on that and make fools of ourselves in the High Court. But it's very interesting, and I'm assuming that this question of whether we can use previous overspill, whether that's going to be really settled until the case does go to the High Court. So yeah. I do feel rather worried because without that, we're only just in the 5 years, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, there is no national guidance on what should be, you know, on what people should do with oversupply. There is arguments, but a lot of authorities similar to us are taking the approach that it's a good idea to actually use oversupply, because or otherwise you're penalised for oversupply and doing a good job in the early years. But and like you say, until it goes, until somebody actually gets a definitive answer in the High Court, then there is no answer on that. But yes, we would be very close if we didn't use an oversupply.
Okay. Alan, did you want to say something?
I think Mark clarified the position. I was just going to add a bit more, but Mark's answer hopefully addressed what Councillor Hollowell was after.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Sandy, did you raise your hand? Did you want to say anything? No, you're okay. Okay, fine. Anybody else would like to add to this? Please, anybody putting their hands up? Anybody shouting and jumping? No, well, well done. So we come to what our recommendations are, and the committee is recommended to approve the Housing Land Availability Study 2020 for the use in development management decisions. Are we in agreement with the recommendation, please?
Agreed.
Right. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Item 7, local development order, and that's Jim.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this follows on from previous meetings where the draft for consultation was endorsed. So I'm confident that members are familiar with what the local development order is and what it's proposed to do. And it's worth noting that it's due to be considered for adoption by full council a week today. The question before this committee this evening is how long is the optimal time period to operate the local development order for before it needs to be either renewed, reviewed, or allowed to lapse. Now, bearing in mind where we are in terms of the local government reorganisation process and the timing of that, the report considers a couple of options and recommends that we recommend to council next week that it adopts the local development order from the date of council to run until the 31st of March 2022. That date was chosen so that it's we have the rest of this current municipal financial year to get people used to the idea that they can operate it, and then it gives the new West Northamptonshire Unitary Authority a whole year to operate it without having to worry about whether to either renew it, review it, or allow it to lapse towards the end of that period. So the recommendation is set out to recommend to full council until 31st of March 2022. I don't think there's anything more for me to add at this point, unless members have any questions.
Thank you. Questions, ladies and gentlemen? Is that Mary-Ann? Mary-Ann, have you got a question? Could you unmute?
Finger on space bar, Mary-Ann. Put your finger on the space bar.
Yes, I think we can probably hear it now. Mary-Ann. No.
I've pressed unmute.
There we are. Got you.
Got me.
Yes.
Yes, my question is, what happens if we realise that something in it is not working at all well, and we would like to change it sooner than 2 years? Can we change it at all, or is it set in stone?
It's not set in stone. I think, well, I'd say two things about this. One is that we've very, very carefully considered this. We've held a number of officer and elected member workshops. We've engaged with parish councils as well. We've done a full public consultation, and there are a number of changes to the draft order that made their way into the final local development order. So it's quite a different and, in my estimation, a fairly safe approach to take. If we were to conclude that actually it's horrendous and we need to change it or stop it early, then we can do that. There's a risk of compensation payments that might be payable to somebody who can evidence robustly that they were just about to use the local development order and they can't. However, I think in mitigating factor in that risk is that the alternative is available to anybody to use a planning application route, regardless of the local development order. That no one's compelled to use it. You can still apply for planning permission in the normal way. So I think that the risk of that is fairly low, to be honest. I think because we've done everything we possibly can to make the LDO as robust and low risk as we possibly can get it, while still achieving our objectives. And the downside risk of somebody seeking compensation from us, again, I think is relatively correspondingly low.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Bob.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, if a neighbour comes in with an LDO and it doesn't sort of come up to muster, and a neighbour complains, because normally neighbours go around and chat to them, say that I'm thinking of building this or having this done to my house, and it won't interfere with your own property. But if they've what should I say, gone behind the guidelines that they first proposed, then where do we step in at that point? Do we send an engineer out there to review it, or a planning person, an officer and assess it to its original design. And if it's not to the original design, then I don't think the compensation payment would come into it from that respect, as you were just saying, Jim. But that said, it's really reviewing what this person has somehow got around the laws or the specifications of the original design. So where do we sit on that one?
Well, it would be subject to the normal planning enforcement powers. So if somebody applies for planning permission, we grant them planning permission and they build something that's different to that, then they risk being made to correct it. And in fact, we've got an example in our district of that having happened, where somebody's applied for the planning permission, been granted planning permission, built something that's so different that we looked at it and we said, no, you can't do that. You've got to change it to what you've got permission for. And that's what they've had to do. So it's no different in that respect. It's exactly the same process and exactly the same outcome as if it were a planning application.
Yeah, I was going to say the same as a planning application, basically. Then, yeah. Well, as long as we're on top of the job. I mean, I've got no sort of thoughts regarding the keeping it running until 2022, because at least then it would give 12 months for the new administration to sort of bed in with it, and if it's up to them then whether they decide to carry on as is or whether they change the length of time or get rid of it completely. You know, I mean, I've got no truck with that, so I would support the recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Bob. Stephen.
Yes, I agree with the recommendation. I think 2 years is sensible because of the changeover of councils, although that changeover may be a lot smoother than could be expected. The only thing is, in the order itself, I wouldn't use the word unitary, because I don't think the word unitary has got any legal meaning. It'll be West Northamptonshire Council, which will be technically a district council still. That's all. I'll support the recommendation.
Okay. Anybody else? You're all very quiet this evening. There we go. Well, thank you for that. So, local development order, the recommendation of the meeting is to recommend to full council that the local development order, if adopted, be in force until the 31st of March 2022. And I think we all agree with that, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Thank you very much indeed. Right, we go on to item 8, which is neighbourhood planning and an update. And I think that really is Alan this time. Alan.
It is this time. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Item 8, neighbourhood planning update, which is an item for noting our quarterly update on neighbourhood planning, which seems to come around very quickly. 3 elements to this quarter's update. Firstly, in relation to progress on neighbourhood plans, you'll note from the report that Ashton are progressing really well and are in examination at the moment, with a second element of consultation concluding this Friday, and we're hopeful after that we'll hear from the planning examiner very, very soon. Hackleton are progressing well to submission, followed shortly behind by Silverstone, Nether Hayford and Middleton Cheney. So some good progress on our neighbourhood plans, which doesn't seem to have been slowed too much by COVID. That brings me on to the second part of the update in relation to COVID-19. Just an update on government guidance, which really is to continue with the neighbourhood plans, and it reiterates that consultation on Regulation 14 plans and submissions doesn't have to take place face-to-face. There is the ability for neighbourhood planning groups to undertake consultation without having exhibitions, physical exhibitions, and having submission documents in hard copy. They can use other means provided they're not penalising elements of the community, and that's something we looked at with Ashton a couple of months ago when they were doing some additional consultation. So there's the ability there to not put things on hold just because you can't get out and about. And similarly, the government has concluded that whilst we're not having referendums until next spring, if a council makes a decision to send a neighbourhood plan to referendum, we can start giving that significant weight. I think the term they use, significant weight in the development management process. So just because we're not having referendums till next year, we can start using neighbourhood plans if the council is minded to send them to referendum. So some good news there in terms of allowing our groups to progress. Final thing in the update, non-designated heritage assets, which this committee saw back in May, the criteria was adopted. That's been added to the relevant pages on the website, and all neighbourhood planning groups have been contacted to let them know the criteria is there and that they should start using it in the decisions that they're making. So 3 elements in the update, good progress being made, and an item for noting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Any questions from anybody? I mean, I wish them luck, because as you know, I helped Kislingbury with their neighbourhood plan, which won an award, national award, but it took an awful long time to get it sorted. So best of luck to those of you who are actually coming very near the top, aren't they, of getting it done. I'm absolutely pleased. So nobody.
Well, yeah, Chairman, the only thing.
Oh yeah, sorry, Bob.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, I'm pleased to see that Hackleton are sort of well in up front getting theirs sorted, and I have to congratulate the team that's been working on this. And you know, they've worked hard and put a lot of time and effort into it, and hopefully early next year, you know, they will be granted the neighbourhood plan. So yeah, well done to them. Thank you.
It's certainly been helpful to Kislingbury, I can tell you. Elaine, is it Elaine or Paul?
Yes, thank you. I was going to reiterate, I was very surprised to see all this lot here. I think it's extremely good to see that work in progress has continued, and congratulations to them all, and let's hope they're all successful.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's not an easy job, I can tell you, but it's well worth it in the end. Martin, hello.
Yes, I'd just like to endorse that really, and maybe through electronic means we could message all those communities with a message from you, Chairman, to pass on our congratulations in the efforts that communities have gone through to progress their neighbourhood plans to the extent they have, and obviously up to date, you know, it's been quite difficult given the coronavirus, but I think communities are to be congratulated in the not insignificant amount of work that they've carried out.
Yeah. So you're asking me to say well done, which I will. Okay, anything else? Anybody else? I'm going along the rows here, having a look at your... No? Right. Our recommendation is to note the neighbourhood plan update report, Appendix 1, in accordance with the agreed neighbourhood planning scheme of delegation. Are we all in agreement with that? We are. Lovely, thank you very much indeed. We come to item 9, which is statement of community involvement. It's an update. And again, I think, Alan, that's you, isn't it?
It is, Chairman, thank you. An update to the statement, not an update on the statement. So this is an actual item for a decision to be made to adopt some revisions to our statement of community involvement. Just to briefly set out, a statement of community involvement is a document we prepare to detail how we will engage and consult during the planning process. That's both development management, local plan preparation and neighbourhood planning. It's a document we're obliged to produce. We do that and we set out how we respond to legislation and also how we intend to consult and engage, taking account of local circumstances particular to the district. Our current statement of community involvement was adopted in 2016 and very much aligned at that time to the local plan process, which was gathering pace back then in issues and options. It was updated last year to include additional reference to neighbourhood planning, which we've just discussed, in light of some the progress we're making and some amended regulations that came out nationally in relation to that. It's before you this evening for a further update in light of COVID-19 and coronavirus, and the implications that has on some of the detail of the adopted SCI in terms of how we engage with people. Part of, and especially in light of the conclusion of the local plan process, with the plan going to council next week for adoption. As part of that, we are required, as part of the plan adoption, we're required to deposit hard copies of the document in various locations across the district, the council offices in Towcester and the libraries. This is something we can't do at present as the buildings are closed. So as part of that and in response to that, and acknowledging that we want a wider audience as possible to be engaged and to view the final local plan, we have set out an addendum to the Statement of Community Involvement, which details how we will publicise the plan, which includes in a variety of sort of social media, printed media, notices, writing out to people. In all of those, that correspondence, we say that you can't go to the libraries, you can't go to the council offices, but that shouldn't penalise you or stop you looking at this, and discuss with the planning policy team if you have issues. So it's an addendum making people aware that just because they can't get to the library, they shouldn't be penalised, and they can chat to us, and we can still make documents available to them as needed and necessary. And the addendum sets that out with a hook, an additional paragraph in the actual SCI itself. So amendments to the SCI to ensure we're still consulting as we should, and ensuring the communities are engaged. And that's item 9 with the recommendation to adopt the revisions. Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Alan. I think COVID-19 has caused a lot of problems for our staff, and I'd say thank you, because you've had to work twice as hard on everything that we've done. Any queries, any questions for Alan, please, ladies and gentlemen? Stephen, yes, please.
Alan, it's just a couple of typos. I'm sure you wouldn't expect anything else, would you? On page 83 and somewhere else, 85, you mention local plan parts 2A and 2B. I think it's just 2 now, isn't it?
It is, and that's probably the bit that I didn't update because I was only inserting in a couple of sentences, but you're correct in that, yeah.
And just a letter missing on page 89, 4.5. Shouldn't it be the town and country local planning regulations, not town and county?
That's well spotted as well. Thank you.
That's what I do, Alan. Thank you.
But I've read that bit twice and I didn't find it at all. I think that's
a good sign, Chairman.
Right, thank you. Yes, sorry, Martin.
I mean, if we don't do it already, perhaps Alan could also consider asking our parishes to put links on their websites, which I think might get through to people as well. I think most parishes, certainly the towns, have websites now, and that would just add to our coverage. Thank you, Chairman.
I think that's a very, very good idea. I think actually the vast majority of parish councils now have websites. So yeah, I think that'd be a very, very good idea. Thank you. Super. Can we write that out to them, Alan?
One of the things we've promised to do in the addendum is to email parishes and ask them to display notices, but we can be more explicit in that and say, this is a notice, can you print it out, and also please put it on your websites. That's a good idea.
Yeah, that'd be super. Right, I'm looking up and down the lines. Oh, John Townsend has joined us. John.
No, but I have joined you. My God, it's been a tough job, I can tell you. Something's gone wrong with my computer, so, but don't panic. I've eventually got here. I went to how. And I'm not saying how far you've got, but the comment I wanted to make when I read this report was the oversupply of houses that come about. And in a way, it seemed to me, oversupply is as much of a failure as undersupply, if you get my meaning. And actually, we see oversupplied into the district, something like almost up to about 30% more than had been planned for. Now, I mean, we all know that is almost impossible to get it right. But I think we ought to look and see why this had happened. I hope that there's a narrative here which we should look and see if there's a lessons to be learnt as to how we got it. Well, it's actually spectacularly wrong. I mean, I know we use the oversupply for future planning, but if we continue to do that, then the district is going to have many more houses than it actually even planned for. And as we're supposed to be a planning department, it seemed to me that we should be looking at that quite carefully.
So this is about our housing supply, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, would you like to, can we go back, ladies and gentlemen, because John's just joined us. Have you any comments to make, Mark, about Councillor Townsend's comments?
Yes, I mean, the only thing I'd point out is that I agree that we wouldn't necessarily want to be in a position where we're delivering more than is needed, but the government does have a drive. I mean, our delivery, in taking the oversupply into account, or it's you then we have a good. If you don't, let me reverse that. If you don't take the oversupply into account, then we are actually going to be more average. And it also has come about in part due to the rapid progression at the major sites such as Brackley and Toaster South, which have developed above what was anticipated at the outset. That, I think, you're always just trying to guess, or not guess, but predict what's going to happen in an uncertain world. And I think that in the coming years, in particular, the oversupply is now going to vanish because development has significantly slowed, predominantly due to COVID-19. So it actually puts us in a good position moving forward that we can maintain a 5-year housing land supply.
Yeah, I quite accept that we want to use it, but I think there are some lessons to be learned from the fact that we did oversupply. And you say, yes, the Brackley and Toaster are being built out. Why are they being built out? Well, because they are absolutely where everyone wants to live. And therefore, there's always going to be, I mean, I would suggest more pressure on us because we are where we are, than there will be even in somewhere like Northampton or even further north. And that we ought to be taking into account in the future the fact of where we are and the fact that we are a very, very desirable place to live. And therefore, there will always be pressure, I think. However many we supply or we allow, they will be taken up quite quickly. Yeah, I mean, it may be the coronavirus has affected it temporarily, but actually, I think as a result of this, a lot of more people who wanted to work from home, they'll certainly want houses with gardens, etc., and not so much flats, etc. And I think there'll be even more pressure on us in the future.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to make any comment on this before we now move on? Right, thank you. Well, I think actually we have agreed item 9, the statement of community involvement. I think we agreed to the recommendation, or did we? No, we didn't get that far, did we? To recommend to adopt the revised SCI on Appendix A. Are we all happy to adopt? Thank you very much. We now come to our final item, which is item 10, review of committee work plan. If you'd all have a look at the work plan. Yeah. So far, we have got for our next meeting, which will be on the 16th of September, conservation area boundaries of Slapton and Quinton, neighbourhood plan adoption of Ashton. Do we hope that's going to go through by next meeting?
We hope there'll be some update at that time. That was just putting on the agenda, easier to remove than add potentially, but
Okay,
hopefully
fine.
the pace it's going up.
Good. Yeah.
Sorry, could we ask how the Slapton conservation area is getting on? We had a lot of discussion on it last time, and there was some doubt. We have made the officers have a conservation area, I think quite rightly. It would be interesting to know how they're getting on with it.
Some initial work on that. We noted obviously discussions and the conclusions of the meeting at the end of May. Work has started on that, not at a great pace, but we are taking that forward, and we'll be bringing you something in September. And I think we'll be talking to Councillor Smallman as ward member before we bring it back to the committee, in order to ensure that there is the ongoing dialogue there, and we're recognising the things of importance to the residents that were drawn out in that previous discussion.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to have neighbourhood plan quarterly updates. Deanshanger Village Design Guide in September.
Hopefully a draft. Deanshanger have been doing work on a design guide for a little while now. It faltered at the start of this year with, not faltered, sorry, it's work slowed at the start of the year with COVID, etc. I'm just picking up again some dialogue with them in terms of finishing off a document that perhaps can be ready for consultation in the next few months, and that may come to committee in September for agreement to take that out for consultation. We've had a few of these over the last couple of years, Stoke Bruin and Poolesbury and a couple of others, so that'll be in addition to that suite of documents.
That should be very interesting indeed. So that's what we're planning for September. Our next meeting is after that is the 25th of November. But I don't suppose we can plan too much, can we? Because we don't actually know what's going to happen with COVID and how our plans are actually going to stack up, do we? Or is there anything particular, Alan?
No, the latter part of the forward plan are things that we hope to bring forward, but you're correct, as there is some uncertainty in terms of COVID and the implications there. But certainly we are working as a team with our colleagues in strategic housing on a supplementary planning document in terms of housing, to draw out guidance with respect to the suite of new housing policies that have in the Part 2 plan. So should that be adopted hopefully next week, the work will be there to supplement that and give guidance to officers, members, developers, the public on what we actually mean in terms of some of those policies. Similarly, developer contributions, we're looking to refresh the developer contributions document we've had for a number of years, and work is starting on that. Then amongst that in the work plan, you've got the quarterly updates and some actual updates on where we sit with the strategic plan and the work that's going on there, which members might find of interest. Potentially just an item for noting, but something there to allow you to understand where work's going on that. Good,
thank you. Well, I think our next meeting is going to be interesting, particularly with Slapton and Quinton. So, Stephen, yes.
Chairman, I just wondered, Alan, I mean, the various SPDs that you've mentioned here, I mean, realistically, what are the chances of getting these through council before we're dissolved next spring?
The housing one, we are working on that at the moment with colleagues in strategic housing. I can't speak for what may go on in terms of committee structures and things moving forward, but certainly we're on timetable for that to come before this committee for approval to go out for consultation, and hopefully subject to that consultation turning around and bringing that, we think, to a committee at the end of the financial year for adoption. Developer contributions is a joint piece of work with our partners in Northampton and Daventry, and there's less certainty there in it from us. It's something we're working jointly with those on, so we'll have to see how that progresses as a joint piece of work. There's elements there that are out of our timetable and control, but we're starting on both, and we hope to bring both forward to the committee as soon as we can.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that you're working with the other councils, because it does give it half a chance. I was afraid if we were working on our own in a cell and we get 3/4 of the way through the thing, that then it might just stand for nothing. The new council might just abandon it. But if other councils are involved in this work, then they'll have some commitment to it, hopefully. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin Johns has his hand
Sorry, Martin.
raised.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Obviously, there's been discussion about the government possibly bringing forward changes in the planning system. I presume if anything does come through in the early autumn, that we'd want to look at that at our November meeting.
I think that'll be very important. Don't you think, Jim? You keep your eye on that, because the government have been threatening constantly to change planning.
Yes, I think, well, we're promised a white paper from the government to review the way the planning system operates. I think once we get that and it's released and we've had a good look at it, then that will be another member briefing. We'll try, depending on what's in it and how complicated it is, we'll see about condensing that into a written briefing note. But if it's what has been widely trailed that it's likely to be, then I think probably there'll be a scintillating PowerPoint session or something for members so that we can have a discussion about it.
I wait with bated breath. Martin, anything else you'd like to say?
Well, on that point, Chairman, I do get slightly frustrated with briefings because we are elected councillors, and to my mind, if a paper comes forward, it's best first debated within this committee, and all members brief thereafter, because briefings are all well and good, but I know planning affects everyone, but it is a critical part of the work of this committee, and I would prefer that that it comes to this body first before just a general information session. I think the information can go out in written form, but I think in terms of grappling with it, it needs a serious discussion by people who keep a watching brief, particularly on planning. I think that's quite important. Otherwise, as you say, it just dulls things really when people are asking questions that not understanding implications of current planning arrangements. But that's my suggestion. Other members may disagree.
I quite like your suggestion. Jim, you got something to say on that?
Yeah, I don't have any issue with that, actually. I think member briefings for when a white paper first lands, I think have value, because as you rightly say, Councillor Johns, it affects everybody. Affects everybody equally. Once we get into the position where we need to consider what our response is going to be, or whether there is going to be a policy or other response to the white paper, then I think you're absolutely right. This is the appropriate body of members to debate it. Yes, so I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Anybody else got anything to say on that suggestion? I think things like that are so important. I think they need a good airing, and I think Martin is absolutely right. Excuse me, I think he's absolutely right. I think it to be discussed at a committee, this particular committee, I think would be a very good idea. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude the meeting, but I'm just going to have a look around you all and say, is there anybody that would like to say anything of interest? We'd be delighted to hear from you. Sandy, please. No, not yet. You're still muted.
Send, Sam, space bar. Hold your space bar down, Sandy.
She's using an iPad. I don't think that's the same, is it?
Or if you can find the little microphone at the bottom of your screen. No.
Jeff can unmute her. Jeff, your host, can you unmute her, please?
Chairman, perhaps we need training in semaphore.
Jeff, hello.
Flags would do.
Sorry, it's not Jeff, it's Louise at the moment.
Oh, Louise, can you unmute Sandy?
According to the participant list, it says that Jeff's the host.
Yes, it is Jeff, but I'm at his machine at the moment.
Ah, right. Louise,
but
sorry.
it won't let me unmute her.
Oh, right.
Oh, gosh.
Sorry.
Um,
I'm unable to unmute from here either.
Unmute all. Tried that. Does that help? Click on it in the participant list on the right.
Down the
Yeah, I'm
bottom
trying that.
I'm just trying a few suggestions on.
Right.
bottom left on
Ah,
mine.
Here she is.
Sandy,
Here she
we've
is.
got you. Whatever you've done. Can you, I'm awfully sorry, can you start again? Because we really did miss what you said.
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Can now.
Okay, it's just a quick question on the Slapton boundary for Alan. I suspect it was just if it comes back to our meeting next in September, and if we have all agreed that the new boundary is the one that should be going forward, what happens? What's the process then? Does it then go out to any sort of consultation, or what's the process after that? After the boundary's been agreed?
Yeah, we would be looking at the process we normally go through is to produce the glossy document, if you like, with the history and the character analysis and spatial analysis.
Yeah.
And a management plan at the back, and we are required by legislation to consult on that in terms of the management plan, and we have historically through the whole conservation area process and the suite of proposals we've got gone out for consultation. So I would envisage coming to this committee for agreement of the boundary and also agreement for consultation. We would take that out, a complete document for consultation, present to the parish council, then come back once we've analysed and considered responses, come back with a final document for adoption. So you're right, we'd need to put something on the bottom of the work plan as well to say Slapton adoption.
Done, Sandy. Can I ask, how long is a consultation going to be?
We normally run with a 6-week consultation.
And is that, who does that go to? Obviously, it goes to the parish meeting in Slapton because there's no parish council. Who else does it go to, Alan?
Parish meeting of Slapton, ward members, portfolio holder, statutory bodies. We normally can just notify English Heritage and people like that who are doing the work, yeah. And put notices in the press as well.
And how long is it out for consultation for?
No.
Usually 6 weeks.
6 weeks.
Debbie, I'm in a meeting at the moment. Can I ring you back?
Yourself, Marianne.
Oh, Marianne, we love you so much. So so that's going to be September. So might it be decided the end of this year, or do you foresee it going into next year?
So looking at the committee dates there, it might be a January committee, but we'll do what we can to see if we can get that any sooner. But I wouldn't. It's a turn of the year. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Alan. Thank you, Chairman, and stay well, everybody.
You're welcome. But thank you, Alan. Let's make sure that it doesn't run over. We want it within our Parliament, if you see what I mean. Not the next.
Definitely.
John.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Really vital that we get it in our Parliament.
Yeah. Yes, please. Very, very important.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, are you happy? Have you had a say?
I must apologise again for not coming in, but I've had real trouble with my main computer, which switched off my email. I don't know, couldn't do anything with it. Here goes my phone. I'm saying goodbye.
Goodbye. Well, I think we can actually say goodbye to everybody now, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And I hope you found it a productive meeting.
Can I just remind everybody that we have a slight delay between now and the closing of the webcast?